Hi, welcome to If I Remember Correctly with Danielle Gates, and I am Ryan Brook. Hello, Danielle.
Hi, Ryan.
Hi. So we are here to talk about something that apparently you'll find out eventually. We just tried to record this, and she got mad at me because I talked about the topic as if I'm not supposed to say that beforehand. We're talking about religious compatibility. I need to say it. Religious compatibility, potentially political compatibility. They're not the same thing, obviously, but same conversation.
What prompted you to want to talk about this?
It baffles me that when people who don't have the same faith can share life together. You don't even think the same journey of life, and it's going to end in the same way, and your afterlife is going to be the same. Like, I'm not saying that I don't believe you should stick with your own kind. Like that's obviously not what I mean by that. But I'm just saying, as if you're going to love somebody and love who they are and want to share your life together, to not agree on the foundation of life and the afterlife seems like a good place to start.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't know anybody who is in a relationship like that. I don't think. I mean, I guess I was. So Johan, so his family is very Christian. He said he was very Christian, and he does biblical things every day, like listens to biblical things and puts biblical things on Facebook, which I find to be very ironic because he doesn't necessarily engage in behavior that is particularly Christian. But
Okay, but you're acting like this is rare. This is most people who call themselves Christian.
I don't know. I guess I don't know enough people. No, because my friend Lizette, she's Christian, and she behaves in ways that are Christian. She does.
Your friend, yes. I'm
Yeah.
not saying there's nobody who does it, but you're saying there's a common conception that
Well, I think most people are turning to Christianity to repent for their sins. So they know that they're shitty people. They've done shitty things. So they're like, please, God, offer me salvation because you forgive everyone. So I think that the more, what I find is the more people are praying, the more they have shit to pray for.
yeah. I have to be able to adjust the microphone with not being. The more they pray, the more they have to pray for.
Like, I usually find that the more you hear people talk about Jesus, the more they're engaging in behavior that is not particularly Christian. And so they feel like they have to pray in order to make up for the behavior they're engaging in. That's what I've found in very Christian communities. It's like, that's why I think we have this, epidemic of pastors and priests who molest children because they run to the church because they feel like they're sinning. So they're like, if I become clergy, I'm almost repenting for my sins. Like, maybe a lot of them are homosexuals and it's not okay. It's not accepted by the church. So it's almost like this conversion theory. God's going to fix me.
Right.
And because you're repressing who you really are as a person, it causes you to engage in behavior that traumatizes other people because you yourself are traumatized because you're not living in your truth.
Yeah.
So I think that, I always am very weary of people who are so God-fearing that it's all consuming and they don't take responsibility for their actions. Because some people, engage in spiritual bypassing and they're like, oh, if I just pray, then it makes up for, the hurt that I've caused.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. I mean, it's a broad strokes, but all this is broad strokes. I mean, there's people who fall in every bit of definition of Christian, why they're Christian, how they became Christian, if they're a true Christian, if they're a Sunday Christian. But we're talking about compatibility of between relationships. So if you really believe the thing that you believe in, I would want somebody who believed in that same thing, just because if it's worth believing in, it's worth loving somebody who believes that same thing.
I mean, it definitely makes your life easier, but I think that it depends. It depends on the relationship. You can't say that one thing is true for everyone. I think that if you have two people, like, for example, I had a mentor at the Bhakti Center. She practiced Krishna consciousness, and she's very, very active in the community, and her husband does not. And they have a beautiful marriage, and it's very healthy, and he supports her, but he's not necessarily, at the Bhakti Center for Kirtan every Thursday. He'll come to some of her performances or something like that, but he's not part of the community. But it works for them because he also has things that he engages in that are not necessarily part of a spiritual practice, but might be other, some other creative entity that she's not a part of, and that works.
I'm not. there's been countless examples of people who have been in relationships and with different faiths, and it's fine. I'm not saying you can't get along. It's just I always just found it interesting that people could overlook that.
Yeah.
And
if you are truly spiritual, if you are truly,
right.
I mean, I think there's this like difference between spirituality and religion, first of all, because religion is about dogma and it's about rules and
Yeah,
regulations.
we've talked about this.
And so like that is true. Like if I have a bunch of rules that guide how I live my life, I have to be in a kosher home or halal or, like that definitely dictates your day to day.
Yeah.
That, or vegan, whatever it is, can't have garlic and onions, that dictates your day to day. Then yes, it's impactful to your home. But it depends on what your spiritual practice is. Like I'm a spiritual person and my spirituality doesn't necessarily involve limitations that would make it hard to live with me.
Right.
I'm not, I actually always have 2 bedrooms because I do a lot of my ritual work and a lot of my spiritual work in a second room. That's not where I sleep. So like that's something that my partner always has to be accepting of, is that I have 2 bedrooms. But, as I don't see it as disruptive. If I'm doing a 40-day Kriya, I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I go into a second room and do whatever it is.
And why do you call it a bedroom though?
I think it's just a second room, an office,
Right.
whatever. It's not.
So you have a bedroom and then you have a spiritual room.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful. Like you said, and that's a good point. If you're both spiritual or both just appreciate that you're both trying your best. I have this belief. Again, I feel like I need to preface this a lot because it's going to come across like wildly, I don't know, something. It's beautiful if you can do that. I was coming from somebody who doesn't believe in anything and who's married to somebody who doesn't believe in anything and dates people, like seems to find people who don't have any real religious attachment. I feel comfortable with that. And maybe it's more of like that, being an agnostic person or an atheist and being with somebody who believes, like that's more of an incompatibility issue that I think, a Muslim would have with a Christian. Because you're not expecting somebody being like, okay, yeah, do you believe this? What? Then I believe that. But I think when the afterlife comes into effect, it's like,
well, I don't even think that matters, because how does what I believe happens to me after my body is no longer here impactful to your life? I mean, the only thing is, if I die first, are you going to be comfortable with whatever decision I made about my flesh? That's where it becomes. Right. But if you're comfortable with the fact that I want to be cremated, or I want to be hung from a tree, or I want to be whatever the fuck,
and you have to do it.
You have to do it. If that's going to make you uncomfortable, then it becomes problematic. But otherwise, if I believe that I'm still here or I'm not, that's on you.
Yeah.
That really, it doesn't impact my day to day.
Yeah.
I think it's when, your practices are disruptive, or it prevents, like, okay, so I have some Muslim friends who are so homophobic that they will not engage in any conversation or be present in front of gay people. Mm-hmm. So that would be a non-negotiable for me. When I met Johan, he very much was I don't want to say he was completely homophobic, but his mindset was so skewed. But I watched him evolve. I watched him become a lot more open. And so that's, again, why I gave him the benefit of the doubt so much, because I saw ways that he did evolve. So I think a lot of that is lack of exposure. And again, just like we were talking about in the other podcast, like I can do more good being present in someone's life who's ignorant than I would isolating myself from them. And sometimes it's a sacrifice that I have to make. Like if I'm with someone who's completely atheist and completely agnostic, to me that seems so hopeless. What happens if that person is in a rock bottom or a life or death situation? What hope do you have? What do you have to look towards? So I would hope that my presence in their life would teach them that there's always something that's looking out for you, even when you're not looking. You don't have the ability to save yourself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess if you're always turning to that, like if I was in a bad place, I'd be like, you could help me just by what your powers, like being mm-hmm. supportive of you and
mm-hmm.
Whatever little things that your partner does to make you feel better.
Yeah.
Like
it's all energy, but that's all magic.
But if you feel like you're drawn to be like, Well, what I would do is I would, go into my spiritual room and I would sit for a moment with my issues and pray on them and, whatever. Then I'm like, well, okay, I'm not going to do that. Like,
Yeah.
if you keep pushing that to me, it's not going to,
Yeah.
it's not going to work.
Yeah, there's no, there are religions whose primary purpose is to convert other people to that religion. Like it's like religion is sometimes kind of a giant MLM company, where like there's this missionary movement that, it's like Jehovah's Witness knocking on everybody's door, guy, trying to get everybody to see the light. My spiritual practice, what I teach and what I believe is that you wait for people to come to you and ask for your support. You don't knock on anybody's door. You don't slide into anybody's DMs and say, hey,
right.
I think you need something. Like, that's actually the opposite. You wait until someone comes to you.
That is that more or less important to you than political compatibility?
For me, it's all about value. Forgive me. So, I think for me, political and religious is all about values. It's kind of rooted in the same thing. So, my political beliefs are rooted in my spirituality and the belief that we are all God consciousness with a different flesh suit. And that at the core of our being, we are all spiritual and light. And so my political beliefs that are very liberal are rooted in the fact that there are groups of people in the world who are oppressed, and there are groups of people in the world who are oppressors. And I vote and engage politically with individuals and groups and institutions that fight for the people who have been oppressed. That is my political belief, which is rooted in the idea that the oppressed are also children of God and God consciousness. So it's the same. And if you don't believe that, then you're not going to be compatible with me, because you're going to engage in behaviors that repeat the patterns of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not empathetic to people who are oppressed.
Yeah. It's more baffling to me than the religious compatibility is political. If you're not
that when
if you're not
like a
aligning
Republican
political.
and
and obviously it comes from the same place, and I think a lot of times it does come from the same place. The idea of the conservative, right wing conservative is a thing, but there's plenty of liberals who are religious in whatever form they're religious. And I don't know. Yeah, I mean, not even a partner, but friends and family that I've lost because of political, differences, and but you hear stories about couples who don't align politically.
I don't know any of those stories. I don't know any. I mean, I really do live in a bubble of liberals. I really do. I know people in my life who are more conservatives, but they're not necessarily in my inner circles. They're not playing in the same places that I am. I will say that my Dominican and my Puerto Rican friends, the majority of them are more conservative than my white friends, which I think is really interesting. I always find it interesting when the children of immigrants or first-generation immigrants are more conservative, because...
But this is also the same. Are they religious as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, it's funny how religion can inform you, but it can push you in either direction. Like
well, it's interesting because a lot of the religion that they practice was actually banned by the same people that they're supporting politically. Like if I'm Dominican and I'm practicing Santeria, and I'm also voting Republican, that doesn't really make sense to me, because Republicans would have banned Santeria, which is why you have to pray to saints and not to Orishas. So, like, I just think it's like, I always go to this analogy when Dave Chappelle was the blind KKK member. Do you remember that skit? Yeah. Like, I always go to that because it's like, do you even realize what you're supporting? And once you do, like, are you humble enough to say, yeah, maybe this isn't aligned? If people have no exposure and they're willing to listen, then it can work. If you're willing to hear my side and I'm willing to hear your side, then we can be completely different.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of that willingness.
I don't know. I think it depends on how much it disrupts your life, and there's going to be a time if you're together with someone for decades where it's going to be disruptive. Where there's going to be so do you remember, I can't really use anybody's name.
It's also like socially too, like, and if you have a big social group,
Yeah.
how do you appear to the people around you socially, and they have to answer for your, liberal or Republican, whatever it is, the outside of your friend group. If they come around your friend group, and it's like, it would be so awkward to be like all your friends are this, or have one, and I don't like even grouping people because
all of my friends where I went to school are all conservative. Every single one of them. They're all
right, but they knew that you were liberal.
Yeah, and I got shit for it. Like, I remember, my friend, her husband called me a communist. My son was like a baby. And I remember he called me a communist, and I started hysterical crying, like hyperventilating. Now, granted, I had just had a baby, so I was having like a little bit of a postpartum emotional situation going on. But also, I remember being so upset because it wasn't about politics to me. It was about values. Because here was a white man who had grown up with lots of resources. His parents had lots of resources, and he didn't care about people like me at the time who did not necessarily come from that and needed more support than I had access to. And like, I just remember, like, it didn't care that he was calling me a communist. I cared that he didn't care about people. Like, that's how I read that. And I was just like, wow, you're just such a shitty person. And there were many times over my friendship, especially once I moved to Brooklyn and like had a different life experience, where I looked back at my friends and I was just like, you guys are fucking privileged assholes, and you have no idea how the world is suffering, and the things that you care about are so superficial, and I hate you all. Like, these were real feelings that I had about people who I'd known for 20 years and 25 years. And there was a point where this past summer, I saw a couple of my friends, and I realized they only were like coming to see me because they wanted details of my life to share with other people from my community. And these were people who were my closest friends for I don't know how many years. And it took like, I guess, going through this experience with Johan and going through this experience with my family and like having all this trauma in my life to be able to very easily say, I don't need you anymore. I don't need you anymore. You don't add anything to my life. Even though there were many times where these people loved and supported me in ways that I could not love and support myself when I was going through shit. At this stage in my life, I have evolved in a way that I can no longer tolerate people treating me like shit. And so if our values are not the same, that must mean that you at some point are treating someone like shit, because my values are in treating everyone with love and respect. And like, if I feel like you're not treating me with love and respect, you're not treating a lot of other people with love and respect, and I don't want to give you my energy. And it's unfortunate because it's a very lonely place. I'm in a very lonely place.
And to like have to say goodbye to everything you thought you knew, and be like, to face how different life is than what you thought it was, or yeah. So it's growth. You know what I mean? It's tough.
It is. It's lonely. Like, I think that
it's so nice when you meet a group of people that are like, you think you can be yourself around, and you don't have to worry that somebody's going to say something stupid that they're going to have to like turn a blind eye to. Like that's my hardest issue now, being on Long Island, like making friends on Long Island. It's like I can't invest time in somebody. It's a ticking time bomb. If I making friends with another like white guy, even if I'm upfront saying like, hey, where do you stand on this topic and that, or this issue, and I feel like, all right, yeah, we align. Like, there's still always the potential to say something, dumb that I'd be like, and then do I write that whole person off, or do I just?
Well, it depends again on their willingness. Like, we all fuck up. We all have flaws. We're all, especially as white people, we all have inherent bias that we don't even realize. And how willing are we to hear feedback and evolve? That's really what it comes down to. Like, if like, we had a conversation about silence is violence and white supremacy, and you were willing to engage in that conversation respectfully. That's all you need, is people who do not see things the same way as you to be able to engage in a conversation respectfully and be willing to hear why people believe what they believe. It's not will you change? It's, are you willing to accept that there might be ways that you can change? And that's true at the root of every conflict about everything. Are you willing?
Yeah.
You know?
And not being willing is only because it's hard. It's hard to be continue to be a better
Not
person.
being willing is a lack of self-awareness, because if you know you're fucked up and you don't want to get better, then that we don't need people like that in our lives. I think sometimes people don't know how fucked up they are. They have no self-awareness. Because they're just surrounded by other people who think like them.
Yeah.
And so they don't know there's anything
Yeah,
wrong
and
with the way
they
that they think.
yeah, you're right. They just think the world is crazy and it's like I can't,
Oh, this is all the problem out there. It has nothing to do with me. And I think.
And that isn't to say that there is problems with the world, and sometimes they're right on some issues. Like and all those things can be true, but for the most part, it's it's just so frustrating. You have to like preach like, why don't you just like go through life loving as possible, as caring as possible? Like what? How does that something that we still have to put on pressure people into doing? Like
Not a lot of people know how to do that.
Be considerate, be empathetic. Like can you just please be empathetic to other people? Like how difficult is that?
Okay, so let's think about it. So why wouldn't people be empathetic? What would be the reason? So if I'm
Because
not
they grew up
empathetic,
a certain way.
if I'm not empathetic to a person's cause, because we also have to have empathy for people who lack empathy. If we are truly being empathetic,
Yeah, you're right.
we have to have
Yeah,
compassion and
yeah,
empathy,
you're right.
not just for people who think like us, but for people who think differently from us. So we have to try and figure out why they believe what they believe. Like when I think about Johan, right? I had this awful experience with him where he did all of these terrible things to me. And everybody's like, how the fuck could you possibly eat dinner with this man who did this to you? And it's because of empathy. It's because I understand how and why he became the person that he is. And I have compassion for him, because how terrible is his life that this is how he lives it, that he will never have anything real. How awful is that? Like I have such a beautiful life that he could have been a part of, but his actions that are between him and God, that have nothing to do with me, led him to a life that's going to be very unfortunate, where he had the opportunity to have a different life. That I feel sorry for him, and I have compassion for him, because I know that when karma is real and when you engage in that kind of behavior, like it comes back. I had this experience because of my own karma,
Don't you deserve more than that though? Like to be with somebody you have to put that much work into, or to have like you can have empathy and compassion for somebody.
Oh, I'm not saying I want a romantic relationship with him. I'm not saying that I'm going to endure that kind of behavior with my husband. Not at all.
But it's
I'm
why
just
you can
saying,
sit across the table and have
yes,
share
exactly.
a meal
I
with
can
them.
sit down and have a meal with him, because I know that he will not grow as a person not having me in his life.
Yeah.
And as long as when I'm sitting and having that meal, I'm not being abused and I'm safe and I feel comfortable. and loved.
Do you think he'll kind of retreat back to who he was more before he met you? Like, not to say,
I think,
you've improved.
I don't think he ever became anything different.
Well, you said he got better, like less homophobic maybe with you, but do you think he'll kind of, do you think that was maybe
That's
for
interesting.
show
I
and
don't
he'll kind
know.
of,
I don't know.
'Cause
I don't know.
sometimes-
I think
'cause
I
sometimes if-
actually think that this experience for him is evidence that my way of life is a problem, because he's being attacked on the internet and his life is so hard now, and he probably sees it because he is such a narcissist that's like, this is all my fault. Like he sees right now me as the villain because I exposed him. Like one rule in Dominican culture is you don't air your dirty laundry. Whatever's happening.
He signed up to
okay?
go on, he knew he was going on TV.
I mean, that's my point, and that's why I think it's okay. I've never aired anyone else's dirty laundry.
Yeah.
We decided that our relationship was going to be public, which is
Yeah,
why I'm willing to talk about it.
Right. So
But,
he's as responsible for that as
I
you
know,
are.
but he I don't think he ever really understood that, and I think that
Well, people love to find any reason why they're not at fault. Like
Yeah,
that's
no.
people's knee-jerk reaction to anything, and it's we could all get better reacting immediately to be like, whose fault is this? Like even like in traffic, like if somebody does something wrong, it's like our first instinct is like, how was somebody else responsible? If you take a minute, like, well, that was actually me. Like,
Yeah.
actually, that was my fault. It's like, we just got to do better getting to the point where it's like, yeah, that was me. I
Well,
did
willing
that.
to accept responsibility depending on the consequences. Like if I accept responsibility, is it going to cost me 20 grand? If it's going to cost me 20 grand, then I'm not accepting responsibility. Is there any financial consequence? If there's none, no problem. I'll accept responsibility. If I'll tell the truth if my husband isn't going to leave me, but if he's going to leave me and that's going to make my life hard, then I'm not going to tell the truth. So it's like you have to feel safe to be honest and to be straightforward, with anything. So like,
What are we talking about? Political compatibility?
yeah.
Yeah, it's really difficult to stay on topic, especially if you're talking about relationships, because
It's all
everything is connected. Everything matters. Like
'Cause
there's
it's
no
all
there's
rooted
no
in
there's no
values.
one topic. There's every topic bleeds into another issue. So love whoever you want. Just do it. Do
Just
it.
make sure that everybody's willing to hear the other side. Everybody, you can marry whoever you want. It doesn't matter if you're on opposite sides of the aisle. I just think that you have to be willing to hear someone else's perspective and not be judgmental. When you don't have judgment,
Yeah.
then you can love. Then you can.
Yeah,
love
but
whoever you
also
want.
don't marry assholes. Don't marry assholes or bad people and affect other people's lives. Don't be
We're
with that
all
person.
assholes in some way.
Yeah, but don't reward those people by loving them and feeding them. You know what I mean? Like, let's make a revolution. Let's
Stop
start
feeding
a
assholes.
revolt where we stop loving
I'm
assholes.
gonna make that merch. Stop feeding assholes.
I mean, right? I mean, there wasn't there like a movement like I don't know when, but like women stopped having sex with their husbands until they demanding change and like like it was a group of women who was like, we're not going to sleep with our husbands until we get what
I
we
don't
want.
agree with that, but I think that's ridiculous.
But like you're
Right.
welcoming this maniac into your home every day. I see like it's I don't know. Let them hate by themselves.
Yeah. All right, that was cool.
Well, that was another one.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah.